I'm Saleha Sajid. I'm a doctor, specifically an oncologist, a mother, a wife, and sometimes a cook. A typical day is a very busy day where I'm seeing patients in a clinic, since I am a clinical oncologist as well, working in the community, and running a practice where I have clinical trial patients that I share with my fellow oncologists as well as myself, who are having side effects, scans that weren't done on time, labs that were not drawn. So it's just a hodgepodge of clinic and research patients all at the same time. We bring clinical trials closer to home. So instead of patients feeling the need to go to downtown, the large medical center, to get access to care for clinical trials, we try and bring the ones that we feel are more common conditions with more common mutations to the community, so patients have the top-notch care, the best and most modern care available right next to their homes. First movement that's going on in oncology right now is called precision oncology, where all cancer patients, regardless of the stage of their disease, have NGS testing done on their tissue as well as their blood. That NGS test tells us if they harbor specific mutations, which we now know are driving their cancers. And as time goes on, we are learning more and more about these mutations. What we have learned is standard chemotherapies may not always be as targeted as we need to be to make those mutations dormant. And that's where a lot of interest in clinical trials is at this point in time. My goal with bringing clinical trials to the community is not to bring them in too early a phase where we don't know whether or not the drug works. What my focus is focusing on either phase 2 or phase 3 clinical trials, which are outpatient, which means these drugs can be given safely in a clinical setting where patients take the drug, they go home, they live a life which is as close to normal, a quality of life as good as can be, and then come back for the next treatment. Another thing is we already know that these drugs are working in the space that they have been introduced in. So I do not work with drugs that we are unsure about their mechanism of their efficiency, more so. So my goal is that when a patient harbors a specific mutation, for instance, and they've gone through a standard of care, chemotherapy, for instance, and I know that there are other standard of care chemotherapies that are available in that space. If I have a clinical trial that targets that mutation, that allows me to provide that treatment early on, I will bring it to the patient as an option and tell them that we know that this drug is targeting that specific mutation that they have, and we have a clinical trial criteria that includes them as part of a trial. I always think it's a good idea to use targeted treatments earlier on, because that means that we are making that mutation dormant or killing that mutation so it's not driving the cancer the way it was on chemotherapy. And of course, if patients are having too many side effects in the clinical trial, despite our best measures to control the side effects, we would not hold them hostage in the trial. They can always have the option of leaving the trial, exiting the trial basically, and moving on with standard of care treatments. We haven't had that so far because we all know that chemotherapies that are just generally used for different types of cancer, they have their own side effects. So it's a balancing act in most cases. That's another reason why our research team is so on top of our patients, where they make sure with phone calls and text messages that patients are able to tolerate the medications that they are on. We are learning about these mutations that are driving cancers like lung cancer, colon cancer, breast cancer, and different mutations in each tumor type. And really, we are seeing the best results where we can actually target those mutations. And learning about them, developing efficient drugs that work on them, and trying to introduce them in earlier stages of disease if we can. Clinical trials are very unique and different in how they handle costs for patients, but know that clinical trials also sometimes provide transportation for patients back and forth if they don't have a family member bringing them to clinic. So things like that patients are unaware of. Since clinical trials are more intense, they require more visits, they require more labs, sometimes they require more frequent scans. And it's a lot of intimidation for the patients, since patients do not want to deal with that. They are already overwhelmed with the idea of dealing with cancer, let alone the extra things they have to do if they're in a clinical trial. But with good support, as well as just open conversations and keeping a close eye on them, making sure that the patients understand that they now have an extended family that's going to help them, hold their hand, and guide them through their cancer care is critical. The last part to answer your question also is to understand that not all clinical trials are the same. Some clinical trials are truly experimental, which is phase 1, where you don't even know if the drug works. And I always bring the patient's focus back to the point that these trials that we are bringing into the community, we know that these drugs are working. We have tried and tested them. The safety has also been tested. We are just trying to bring the trials introducing the trial into an earlier phase of disease. And that's really my focus for community trials. The trial protocols are very stringent. There is little deviation that the trials allow, because they have to gather their data in a more cohesive way so they can publish it. But it's all dependent on me and my efforts to get patients as much exceptions as I can based on their unique conditions. So I have patients who are in special categories for clinical trials where otherwise they would have been excluded from the trial. I talk to the drug sponsors, I speak to the medical monitors, and ask for them to make exceptions on behalf of my patients. And about half the time, they make those exceptions, and half the times they don't. You just have to fight for your patients. The research team is excellent about keeping an eye on patient side effect profiles. And that is key, because if the patient is unable to tolerate a medication, we have to act quickly and make sure that we give them the appropriate medication and get the desired response. If we don't, then the patients will have a very high grade of side effect, and that could be exclusionary for the study. So our research team is very involved with patients, even if it sometimes requires calling them multiple times a day or texting them multiple times a day to make sure they've picked up the medication that was prescribed to them, or if there's an issue with pharmacy, to make sure that they're taking the medication like they're supposed to, so it can bring the desired side effect relief that we are hoping for. So if the experimental therapy does not work, they are removed from the trial right away. And then if there's another trial that is available for them to explore, we would offer that, or we would offer standard of care. So the insurance does not cover trial-related care. The trial covers trial-related care. And in terms of the costs and expenses, anything that is trial-related, which is the drug, the labs associated with the drug, the scans to monitor the trial, response to the drug, are all covered by the trial. Sometimes the trial goes further as to provide some compensation for patients for their time because of the extra visits and inconvenience it might cause them. Sometimes it also pays for their Uber rides if they are having difficulty getting to clinics to get the trial-related stuff done. Anything that's standard other than clinical trial-related stuff that can be covered by insurance is covered by insurance. But there have been times where patients have come in for an extra visit that was not related to trial, and the trial has also gone ahead and covered it. So it's actually really, really cost-effective for our patients. I always encourage patients to bring an extra set of ears with them. The information is so much and so overwhelming sometimes for patients that they are not even in a state of mind to understand or comprehend what we are telling them. And we always encourage engagement from family, because you need family around if you're a cancer patient. There are several resources that are available online. A very good resource is American Cancer Society, as well as American Society of Clinical Oncology. They also offer patient advocacy groups that are zoned to different states and different cities that patients can be a part of. So we always, if patients need it, we always encourage them to reach out to those advocacy groups. I've actually created advocacy groups within Genesis Medical Group. If you are a colorectal cancer patient with a specific type of mutation and you're struggling with a certain drug and you don't have a lot of support besides us and the research group, then patients match up with each other and they have someone who can hold their hand through the treatment or just talk about it. So we encourage that within our clinical practice. Also, I will provide links for my website, Lumi Research's website, where patients can find a ton of information about what clinical trials are, what makes them unique, and patients can always reach out to myself as well as my research team with any questions about clinical trials.